when we saw the word woman in our information, in our data, it all instantly clicked. Woman was our word of the year. In 2022, the word woman, how it's defined, who's included in that definition, and who the word applies to was at the center of so many consequential moments, discussions, and decisions in our society.
In 2022, Dictionary.com selected woman as the word of the year after searches on the website for the word woman increased by more than 1,400%. The biggest spike happened in March 2022 during the confirmation hearings for Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition?
No. Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist. If there's a dispute about a definition, people make arguments, and I look at the law.
This represents one of those rare cases that we see as a dictionary. When a word's not just in a spotlight, but its very definition. The very definition of the word woman was what was in the spotlight. And the prominence of the question, the attention it received demonstrates how issues of transgender identity and rights are now so frequently at the forefront of our national discourse. Other spikes happened during this year, 2022 as well. And all of these contributed to search volume for the word doubling compared to an average year. That includes the confirmation hearings of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, like I said, but also the fact that she later on became the first Black woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. We have other themes as well, and that's why woman serves as such a powerful through line for so many of the major events and themes of 2022.
The conversation between Justice Jackson and Senator Blackburn is connected to a cultural conversation around gender identity.
So the question of who is a woman has been around for sure as long as women's movement activism has been around, which is something it's important to remember. I think in the present day when, in 2023, people sometimes seem shocked that there's so much contestation about issues of inclusion. But this is actually nothing new for women's movements.
But understanding who falls into the category of woman may not be as easy as a Google search. Here's the origin of the word.
We have evidence, written record of the word woman going back thousands of years. The year 900 is an approximate date in which we can find it in a written record. At this time of English, we called the language Old English, and the word woman was Wifman. W-I-F-M-A-N. You can tell that the way I pronounce that word also shows how language is changing over time. Wifman is made up of two parts. Weef, W-I-F, that originally meant just female or woman. It's the source of the word wife, but many, 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 many years ago, it didn't have the marital connotations that it does now. There's an example of language change in action.
The way language works and how we understand words are constantly changing, which then impacts how we talk or use different words, and that matters.
I mentioned that it's our job as a dictionary to document, describe language, and our language is constantly evolving. When we look at the types of language change that we as a dictionary have observed in the past several years, we see a major pattern. That pattern, one of the major patterns that we see, is centered on identity words. These are the words that people use to label themselves and others. An especially dynamic area within this centers specifically on transgender and non-binary identities and how people are expressing themselves in language.
If you want to build a coalition of people who are willing to spend time, energy, etc. on like trying to engage in change, like you need to acknowledge that those people may not all have the same experiences or needs. So building a group of people who want to work on these issues, I think does require acknowledging diversity in those experiences.
But defining who is a woman and what issues are protected under the fight for equal rights hasn't always been equitable. 2023 will mark the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution that granted women the right to vote. But Black women were often excluded from exercising that right, and many white suffragists at the time refused to rally behind the 15th Amendment, which granted the right to vote to black men.
But you can go back to the 19th century to the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, which is often regarded as launching the first wave of feminism. And it was only just a few years after that that Sojourner Truth gave her landmark speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" really pressing on white women activists at the time to think more inclusively about across racial lines about what it means to be taking a stand for women's rights. So it's nothing new. It's also not, the issue of who counts as a woman and whose name does the women's movement speak. These questions haven't been answered yet.